Can all hear me? Welcome all, and good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Bukola Shonuga. I want to welcome you to this discussion on the 2024 election, the immigrants' voice and vote in the 2024 election. I have a few guests waiting to join this conversation, but in the meantime, there is a video. Let me further introduce myself, by the way. So my name is Bukola Shonuga. As I just said, I'm an independent journalist based here in the US. And I'm also the acting chair for the United African Coalition. United African Coalition was founded in 2013 because there was a void in electoral representation of the immigrant community, at least in the New York City area. So we have a few candidates who were running for a particular district in the Bronx. So that was how this organization came to be. And since then, we've endorsed many, many candidates. And one candidate that we endorsed, that's also one of our brothers, is His Excellency Ambassador Siddiq Y, who is now the Sierra Leone ambassador to the United States. So, but on that note, we have some people joining this conversation. But before then, I would like to share a video from the event we had a few years ago during the presidential election that we believe is very relevant to this conversation we're having now. So I'm going to find that video. I'm somewhat technologically challenged, but I will find the video so I can play that video for you guys.
From the system for our communities, and our communities have been highly affected by COVID. And when our families are talking about, the differences between where we're from or where our parents grew up and why we came to the US, access to affordable healthcare is an important topic or conversation that is being discussed. And so it's really important that we center our conversations around issues and our values of why it's important, ideals and what really leans Africans left or wanting to be Democrats, especially young Africans. These are issues that affect us every day. Diana already talked about immigration policy, but also small business policies, right? We have a majority of our community, you already gave the numbers, I'm not going to go into that are affected by COVID due to the pandemic. We've seen a lot of businesses shut down. We've seen a lot of businesses that didn't have PPP, a lot of businesses that didn't have funding. And so it's very important that we have conversations about access to funding, such as grants, and also the conversation that minorities are not really being brought up into the business conversation. And Africans really need to be centered in that conversation to be like, okay, we have economic power. Well, how are we really exercising this to be political power? That transition is very crucial for us in our community to say that we want a place at the table or want a seat at the table when we are talking about policy making or decision making. And the conversations such as, pay equity or equal pay or job security are issues not only for our community, but it's a conversation that all Americans face in general. And these are issues that are the fabric of our society right now and what it means to be, to accomplish the American dream or work hard, but actually getting paid for what you deserve for what you work for. And so what I think to end, what I think the Democratic Party really needs to focus on is speaking to the core values of what it means to be American. And why so many of us as immigrants, especially African immigrants, came into this country in the first place. From the issues of we talk about immigration reform, newly naturalized citizens. It's very important that we center these conversations around things like Social Security, healthcare, social justice, and more. It was already pointed out earlier, but it's so important that we focus on our power and what it means to have power. I feel like a lot of times the African community, we sit back and like to have decisions made for us. But right now it's very important that we see ourselves reflected in the decisions being made on behalf of our community. When I worked for the 2016 election cycle for Obama for America, when I worked for 2016 for Hillary for America, there was not an African diaspora for Biden. There was no committee that was focused on, or African diaspora for Hillary or African diaspora for Biden. There was no really ethnic community that was focused on addressing issues or bringing us to the table to have people speak on behalf of our community. And right now we have that place. And it's so important that we really build that network and really support each other instead of addressing just like the fragmented issues that happen in our community. It's really important to focus on that. And to end, I think that the Biden-Harris campaign needs to really have a clear stance on these issues that affect us, especially in these last 38 days. Right now, what we see is very broad policy and addressing just immigration reform or issues in general. But what young Africans want or young people want is talk about specifics. If you actually want us to be excited, want us to come out in numbers to the polls, like Obama did. Obama had his policies on his website really early on. And so young people were really excited to see, okay, we're seeing ourselves reflected in these issues that affect our community on a daily basis.
So again, thank you. You're welcome. My name is Bukola Shonuga. Thank you for joining this discussion on the immigrant votes and voice on the 2024 election. That's why we're here. So I'm going to introduce my guests. I'm not sure if all of them are here, but let me see. So Mr. Diallo, I'm not sure if Abdurrahman Diallo is here yet. Abdurrahman Diallo ran for election in the Bronx. I don't remember what the district was. So it's one of our guests. Also have Representative Okoye Gabe Okoye. I think Rep Okoye is here with us. Dr. Motoshaw is one of the prominent community leaders in New York City. I'm not sure if Dr. Motoshaw is here yet either. He also ran for election. Actually, Dr. Motoshaw's bid for election District 16th in the Bronx in 2016 led us to the formation of the United African Coalition. So when Dr. Motoshaw comes on, he will introduce himself and speak about why he decided to step up to represent his community. And by doing that, he really empowered and inspired us to form the United African Coalition. So I have Mrs. Lara Okunubi, she's with NEPAC. I'm not sure if she's on. Ms. Akindele Nelson, also with NEPAC. And Mr. Ibrahim Garba is also a prominent leader in the African community in the Bronx, and he's very active in the political landscape in New York City and the US and Nigeria in general. And I have Mr. Mamadou Yang. Mamadou Yang is a veteran journalist and an expert in political affairs, global and also African affairs. And also Mr. Alimadi, Milton Alimadi. I'm not sure if Milton Alimadi is able to join us, but Milton Alimadi is a publisher, also a journalist, and is also a professor of journalism at, I believe, Columbia University. Okay, thank you all and welcome to this conversation on the immigrants' voice and vote in the 2024 election. So the idea is that we are at a, really testing time in history in America that started in the last presidential election cycle 8 years ago. And we thought, things have changed somewhat in terms of the threat to immigrants or maybe some of our rights being taken away and so on. But as we're looking at the landscape right now in 2024, we see that immigrants face many challenges. And this is why we have conveyed, the United African Coalition has conveyed this forum to get perspectives from different, experts in our community and leaders in our community and also elected officials to talk about what challenges immigrants face, imminent challenges immigrants face in this 2024 election. And I'm just going to read a little about what immigrant contributes to this society. Immigrants often fill gaps in the labor market, taking jobs that locals may not be available or willing to do. They contribute to economic growth through entrepreneurship, innovation, and tax payment, especially tax payment. Many immigrants start businesses, creating jobs, doing innovation, driving innovation. Depending on the outcome of the election, this coming election, and the political ideology of the winning candidate, there could be significant changes in immigration policies. This may include reforms to legal immigration pathways, changes in enforcement priorities, or shifts in refugee asylum policies. So that's just a start. And before I continue and actually pass on this question to one of our guests or any of our guests, I also want to inform of something that I'm sure many of us might not be aware of, that African immigrants are actually elected to political office in this country. I mean, many of them really across the United States. And I was surprised doing my research to find out that there were this many. First of all, there were about 20 Nigerians elected into political office in the United States, but there are other immigrants as well. So we have Minnesota, Lan Oma, elected to the U.S. House of Reps in 2018. Hodan Hassan, serving in Minnesota House of Representatives. Mohammed Noor, another member of the Minnesota House. Omar Fateh, elected to the Minnesota State Senate in 2020. Esther Agbaje, the youngest, African immigrant, the first Nigerian American, elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives. We have Maryland, Will Jawando in Maryland. Ohio, Munira Abdullahi. I mean, so many Africans. And on this line, we have elected official, Gabe Okoye. And I'm actually going to pass on this question or turn the table to Mr. Okoye. Rep Okoye, if you're here, please, you're welcome. And please talk to us. What inspired you to want to represent your community? And what has your experience been so far? I know you've been in this country for so many decades, like I have, and some of us on this forum. But speak to us about your experiences so far, and how you think, or do you think this, election period, this presidential election in this cycle, do you think that immigrants face any challenges or threat? Welcome, Mr. Okoye.
Thank you, Buki, and hello, everyone. It is actually very important that we have these discussions across the board. I will tell you one thing that Africans have been doing, and it hasn't served them well. We change it, we're going to see a big difference. We always want to stay at the fringe. If you stay at the fringe, you'll be just used to play football. If you are in the game, you play the football. So what do I mean by that? We don't usually mix. We need to get involved. We're already here. This second-class citizenship syndrome plagues us a lot. When you are a citizen, you are a citizen. You have all the rights. Just don't forget that. Get involved. That's what politics is all about. I am on the seat that I occupy here in Georgia, not because of our Nigerian community, but because of the American community at large, because I got involved. I was actually elected party chairman in my county, Democratic Party chairman, because I'm a Democrat. And I have served in commissions in the county, and my name was out there in the county. It made the election a little easier, if not a lot easier, because I have been involved in the community. And that doesn't mean that you cannot serve the African community, because as many of you that are on this call know, I have also served the Nigerian community very well, starting from being Igbo Union president to being chairman of Nigerians in diaspora for the two continents of America. Now, as far as, and I say all of this to encourage us to do more. And I know what happened when I was elected party chairman. I received calls from all over, and everybody would ask the same question. Chief, how did you do it with your accent? That was when I learned that we think that our accent is a barrier. And I want to tell you, my accent is not a barrier. My answer to everybody who asked that question was, if you do not sound like me, you are the one with the accent. Because frankly, if you bring somebody from New York down here, that person has an accent. It won't sound like a Georgian. If you bring a white Californian down here, that person will not sound like a Georgian. You bring somebody from neighboring Alabama down here, they will not sound like Georgians. So everyone, frankly, have their own accent. Why would mine be a hindrance? I actually made sure that I don't sound like Americans because my accent is part of my identity. And I'm very proud that I maintained it. If I had wanted to, I would be sounding more American than I do right now. But I didn't want to. As far as the experience, what it has been like, it has been great because knowing how much I have used this position to help my fellow Africans, that is the most fulfilling part of it. In this country, when you are elected to serve, you serve. Okay, it's not like you're going to be elected and then you just go around drinking champagne and eating issue and all this stuff. No. So it is important that we know that we are not second-class citizens. It is important that we know that your accent is not a barrier. It is who you really are. And frankly, everyone has an accent. And for me, if you don't speak and talk like I am now, you have an accent, not me. Okay, that's what's important to note. And I will tell you, I think the other question was why I got into this. I decided to run this position. Well, the why I think should be obvious. We have come, we have seen, we need to conquer. And that's the stage we should all be at right now. Down here, we didn't get elected. Nobody, no, there was no African elected to office here. And then I'd say, hey, we need to get involved. And we need to pave the way for our younger ones by introducing African names to the political lexicon of this area. And that was what was my motivation was, to make sure that Africans are represented. And lucky enough, there were 5 of us to begin with, 3 of us born in Nigeria, 1 born here, 1 by marriage, that succeeded the very first time. We are narrowed to 4 because 1 passed. But what's more important is that we get off I speak French sometimes, we get off our butts and just get into the game. Play the football, don't become the football. I don't know if I answered your question, Buki.
Absolutely,
But if not,
absolutely, yes, you did.
I don't know if you listen, if you were around when I said I'll be leaving at 1:45.
Yes. Yes, I heard you. But I mean, thank you so much for what you've said so far. We really appreciate you. That's why we wanted to invite you, because you've been in the trenches and you're elected to, to represent your community. So that's really great. Please, if you can hang around for a few more minutes, would be really great. So thank you. So I'm going to invite Mr. Akindele to speak. So Honorable Akindele Akinyemi is the National Political Program Secretary of the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee, NAPAC, USA. Mr. Akindele, you're welcome. Please, I didn't post any question to you. I'm not sure if you heard the question that Representative Okoye just answered. But the topic of this event, as you're aware, is the immigrants' voice and vote in the 2024 election. And as a prominent leader at NAPAC, And also you've been in the US for decades, like most of us. You understand this terrain, the politics, and especially being part of NAPAC. I mean, there was a reason why NAPAC was formed, right? To make sure that, you guys mobilize resources and mobilize support for whichever candidate. I don't think you're a partisan organization per se, just like United African Coalition, we're non-partisan. So please please go ahead and speak to this topic. Why do you think we're at another crossroads, right, in America, and a really serious threat to the immigrants' rights in this country? You talk about citizenship, paths to citizenship, and a host of other issues. Please go ahead.
Thank you for having me. There's a number of reasons why immigrants, in particular African immigrants, must get involved in the 2024 elections. Primarily what this election is setting the tone for is for the next 10 to 20 years of public policy here in the United States as it pertains to Black immigrants. And the reality of the situation is, I heard you mention earlier about the number of Africans that are elected nationwide here, whether it's Minnesota. I myself, I'm elected here in Michigan.
I see.
I'm the only Nigerian elected in the state of Michigan. I'm on the library board. I'm the president of our library board here in the city of Inkster, Michigan. I'm the only one that's elected here. So many Black immigrants come to me for advice, and primarily we have to be engaged. Now, part of that engagement is understanding the importance of being a precinct delegate or precinct captain. You need to be engaged at the grassroots level. You need to be engaged in talking to your churches. Our faith-based community is strong in the African community. However, we have not engaged them in a sense of mobility. If we had that type of base where we can engage our faith-based community in terms of mobility to get the vote out, we could actually make a big difference in our local and state and federal elections in our respective communities. Now, how do we know that the faith-based vote works and that kind of mobility works? Well, if you look historically here in the United States, African Americans have always used the church and faith-based in their faith-based communities to mobilize the vote, and they still do in the form of civil rights. The African immigrant community is really no different. When you are sitting here fighting for immigrant rights as it pertains to stopping deportations, when you're talking about social justice issues that's pertaining to immigration reform, these are issues that affects us the most. And so we have to start looking at ways to engage our community, faith-based, business, civic, and other, to engage at a much higher level in order for us not just to run for office and get elected. That shouldn't always be the goal. Sometimes you have to engage your business community to turn out the vote. Sometimes we have to lobby as an organization or law firm. Maybe we have a Nigerian American law firm that can lobby on certain issues for us in terms of business reforms for immigrants and so forth. But we have to become more sophisticated where we at in order for us to really make a big difference. I myself, one of the key things that I bridged trust and built trust in a community like Inkster, Michigan, is that I got involved in the community early. I was the chair of our city's downtown development authority for 4 years. I was the chair of the Economic Development Corporation for 4 years. And I've been on the library board for pretty much 10 years. We helped build a new library here in the city of Inkster. Can look at that, a Nigerian American leading the effort for a $2 million project right here in the city of Inkster. People in the beginning didn't even trust me. They thought that I was trying to infiltrate this city, which is predominantly African American, with Africans. And I told them, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. It's no secret. However, it's not that we're trying to take over. It's that we're trying to build bridges to move the process forward. And so we built my team here. What we did was we integrated with our community. We built capacity and shared prosperity. And here we are right here in the city of Inkster. And now We take that same platform across the state of Michigan, and now we're trying to make Michigan relevant to the African experience from an economic perspective. And so one of the key things that we have to understand about immigrants, we have a voice. We have a voice as it pertains to not just getting out the vote, but being mobilized with our voices on immigration issues, business issues, education issues. We have a right to tell our federal lawmakers, hey, we need education, we need immigration reform at a academic level. Why does an F1 student from Nigeria or Kenya or Ghana, a F1 student can't work for a year and a half to 2 years? They have to go hustle. They have to sell food or on the side. How come they can't work? You go to Canada, you can get an F1 visa, and they'll even give you a social insurance number and a work permit to work the first year. How come we can't do that? Because we're not advocating for that. And so that's a good space for us to advocate in terms of getting our voices out. So I'm going to stop right there. I do have to run. Unfortunately, I have an event going on right now, but I wanted to jump on here just to talk. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you
Yeah.
for
Be-
Thank
Before I leave, I wanted to tell you what I'm working on, so that if anybody is interested, you can get involved too. Because we can talk all we want to. It's not going to yield much of any dividend. I'm going to use an example to tell you, to explain what I mean. Listen, Israel. It doesn't matter which party controls the White House. When it comes to Israel, this country will always side with Israel, no matter what. And they have. And they will continue. And it's not about Israel. It's just because the Jews here have mastered the game very well. They have a very powerful pack that they use to get what they want. They have numbers, they have money. But I want to also assure you that Africans have numbers and we have money. So about 3 weeks ago, I got a few African leaders together in the US. I want us to form an Afri-Pac. This is not anything else but strictly a pressure group to influence the political decisions in this country. They are using the political system to the benefit of African countries, because that is how you actually gain a lot out of the political system of this country. So we can talk, but until we constitute, and I'm telling you now, once we succeed, nobody running for president will not come and want to meet with us. And it's not going to be pleasant. Because in my place, we say that if the chicken has more meat than the goat, you go with the chicken. So if a Republican candidate agrees with whatever asks we may have, we'll go with him. If it's a Democrat, we go with him or her, okay? But it is a pack, and there's nothing you're going to gain from it, but when Africa succeeds, we will all gain from it.
Thank
So
you.
that's what I'm working on. And I'm going
Thank
to be
you, Brother
leaving.
Okoye. I will reach out to you to collaborate. We would definitely have to mobilize and work together. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you. Thank you for taking time. Now I'm gonna go to Mr. Yang, Brother Mamadou Yang. I mean, a veteran journalist. For the last 30 years or so in this country, I mean, when we talk about African events and African development that really are significant to our community, also to the continent, So brother, I call him brother Mamadou Yang, has been at the forefront. Any event we have done, making sure everything is recorded, making sure the contents are created accurately and correctly, bringing that professionalism to bear. And it is the one that we call on all the time. I mean, we talk about not just fact checking, but when we see him show up at any event, and I really mean this, and I really appreciate you being here, it means that you value that event, and that's why you show up. And it could be a small event in the community, it could be a global event, you're always there. So Brother Yang actually was bureau chief for French television for over 25 years in this country. Now he has his own Next Media, is his new, not new, he's now operating on the Next Media. Brother Yang, thank you so much for joining this conversation. I mean, you've seen it all. I don't even think I need to ask you a question. I mean, from then till now, immigrants in this country, we're the lifeline, the backbone of this country. So I would just have you to just pick up from there. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure I can fill all those shoes that you're sending me. Thank you very much for inviting me on this forum, but your introduction. Well, so are you, Buki. I mean, you're the voice of the community. And you've been doing this for a long time in so many different ways and so many different platforms. On radio, you did on radio, you did on print. And it's just like it is the way it is here for Africans in this country. We're still, fighting hard for that piece of the pie in all realms of and all walks of life. But you're still doing this, so I admire you, believe me, and I commend what you're doing.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I am not, I've been passionately listening to our previous speakers, sisters and brothers, who are actually, on the field of politics. I mean, these are the ones actually who joined the ranks, who took the mantle to fight the struggle. So all we could do is support you. Buki and I are not really politicians. Buki is a community leader. And as she described me, I am, right there in the trenches looking and see, what we could say, how we could relate what's going on and share the information and see how we can strengthen and empower our communities. But on this particular topic, I mean, I've been listening and I see two streams of conversation here. Those who are already on the arcane of politics, who understand the dynamics and the mechanics, of not only bringing your voices, your community's voices to bear, so you could see how you could benefit globally, and also those who still don't understand how, as African, we cannot really, commune together and bring that huge African magma, that huge African demographics to bear, because we are 2 million people here in this country. But 2 million, we're not like you call, the Latino vote in America. There is no such thing as the African vote. And the reason is simply because, we're a continent of 54 countries. As much as we are so similar in terms of our implant and our origins, we are so dissimilar in so many different things. And we have to also understand that we have to think, when we speak about Africans, in terms of affinities. Africans are here in Little Senegal, they're here like, in some swaths in the Bronx with the Ghanaians are 50 million. I'm sorry, 50,000. And how we could reconcile that desperate arc of our population, I think it's our first challenge. And how we can bring that to bear, like on an electoral voice, is also a different, I think, a different enterprise. But in terms of this election, I think that it is important that we think of it as not how we could come together as Africans and bring our voices to bear and be heard but this is such a critical election for us like it is for anybody else. And we say at every cycle, this is the most important election. But this one is definitely the most important elections in our history at this moment. It is true. And we could, think of it in so many different ways. But those who are holding office are not really more powerful than those who are organizing our communities in the Bronx or in Brooklyn or in Harlem. So we say that in this, tightly contested landscape of US elections right now, we just have to realize that the vote of every single person is magnified. And this is especially in the battleground states, not in New York City, not in Washington, D.C., not in say Maryland. We're talking about the Houstons of the world. We're talking about Minnesota, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada. Those are the critical states for the Democratic Party to win. And there are Africans there. So I'm using that to say that maybe our role is to find a way to help and rally support for those African voices in those swing states, in those very critical states that the Democratic Party must win. Now, we don't have that really network of infrastructure that goes coast to coast and north to south that connects Africans. There is a Latino vote. Now, it is an abstract. There is a reality in it because they have Latino organizations. Now, we don't have a supranatural African organizations. That's where we need to get. But we also have to remember that we are a very young community in terms of our generation of immigration in this country. So there are so many things that we have to consider that those brothers and sisters who spoke earlier and so eloquently defined the singularity of their experience, which means that actually in their either election or adoption into where they are right now, in the political ecosystem of where they live, where they evolve, it is the voices of those communities. It is not the Africans that has actually realized their capacity, how they can really bring to bear because of their eloquence, because of their power, because how helpful they can be for the community. So we have to see how we could really come together. But again, I'm just saying that ethnicity is very complex. Nationality is even more complex. Do not think that because we are all Africans here in this nation, it is easy for us to come together. We have to work at it. If you see that the African Union has not realized actually that confederation of all Africans. Now, just think about our presence here in America. It's the work that we need to do, and it is anthropologically and sociologically actually studied. People group together by affinities, by communalities, by origins. So we have to start there and see how we could really maybe reframe or find a new framework for the conversation to have a huge African consensus. We can call like the African vote, just like the Latino vote. So I'm going to stop there. And if you have any question, I cannot speak politically because I'm not a politician, but I'm just seeing it demographically that there are things that we need to do. Ilhan Omar, if you name it singly, she was elected where she is, not only by Somalian, even though, there are 57,000 Somalians in Minnesota. And it is a different place because it has been one of the first destination in the 70s and the 80s of refugee resettlement in America.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Mamadou. So to underscore some of what you just said, especially the last few words, those Africans that have won out of states, they were not elected just by Africans. And if they were only relying on African immigrants' vote, I don't believe they would have won. And those are part of the challenges that we're having in this region, the tri-state region of New York City, where I reside, in our local election communities as well, that we have majority of Africans in some of these district elections, but Africans are now working together to win the seat. So that's part of the conversation we're going to have. We have limited time, but I'm going to touch on that a little bit because not just me, we're interested in learning how and why some Africans in other states have been successful and successfully elected, and why we're still struggling to do that in the New York City area, where we have a lot of African population, over at least maybe around 200,000 is the number that we know of. Anyhow, I'm going to go to Mrs. Lara Okunubi. She's also part of NEPAC, and she's a prominent, actually member of leadership of NEPAC. And she's also a prominent leader in the African community in the United States and also in Africa. She's done a lot of tremendous work in the philanthropic area and also mobilization in the political arena. I call everyone brother and sister because I know you guys for many years and we've worked together. So welcome, Mrs. Okunubi. Please go ahead and speak to this topic of the immigrants' vote and voice in the 2024 election from your vantage point and your experience also in this landscape. What are your views or perspectives?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, there are multiple issues, and I would concur with some of what most people have already talked about. By the way, NEPAC supported more than 20 people to win their elections, including Rep. Good Okoye in Georgia. There's Oye Wolewa, there's Karo Kazim. I mean, so many of them that we could name, but we are making success. First of all, the positions of politicians is not a glamorized position. It's a sacrifice, and it takes a lot out of them. For us as Africans, I think that because we're educated and we feel like we have significant number, we're having a false sense of entitlement to be heard. There are sacrifices that goes with that. We have to begin, in my opinion, we have to begin with setting or identifying our values and setting priorities. Average Nigerian, I can speak to Nigeria, when you go to a party, the usual social party, they're ready to spend 200 or 300. You could see the depth of wealth that we have. But when you ask them for $20 to contribute towards political program or whatever, you better have another tank of air to breathe, because they would grill you and grill you and grill you. So it's about the priorities not being right. Yes, the other gentleman who talked about Israel, he is right. Israel got it right from the beginning. And they put their money where their mouth is until we get to that point, because we have to solve the root issues that within our organization, particularly Nigerians. We come from a country where politics or advocacy did not really work successfully. And here we are, we see that it's working here, but we're not part of the solutions. So people have to know that politics is just not about political offices. It affects every ecosystem. It affects the economy. It affects the cultural aspect of it. It affects language. It affects so many things. And it is now, this is the only legacy I feel we can pass down to our children, to get them involved in advocacy. Don't look at politics as being polarized, you are Republican or Democrat. No, think about it as policies that will affect the community and the generations to come. And what is your take in those policies? Everybody have a voice. We only have one voice. About 15 years ago, Sister Buki, you came to California. I think it's that long, or 12 years ago. And I think we shared with you, Mr. Kusai and I, we had gone to the registrar's office, county registrar's office, and we were demanding, I used the word demanding, saying that, well, on the voting ballot, you have Korean language, you have Taiwanese, you have this, you have that. How come you don't have any African language? He first of all looked at me, he said, which African language would you prefer to put? I said, well, in Nigeria, we have 3 predominant languages. He said, okay, here is 10,000 registration card. If you come back with this card completed, we will put your language on the voting ballot. We couldn't even fill 1,000 because people were not interested. So those are some of the root causes that we have to talk about. And Akindele Akinyemi, before he left, talked about the faith-based. Yes, this is where predominant number of Africans are. They're either in the mosque or in the churches. But the churches continually act like their hands are tied. They cannot combine politics with religion. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking you to empower your congregation to participate in what works in this country. This is a structure that works in this country. You go to the polling booth and you vote your choice or whatever your preferences are. And you know, the church, I have accused a lot of them, the pastors in the church, they now say, oh, the gay, the pride, these people are terrible, you can't associate with them. No, 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 no. When the gay marriages was on the ballot, the church people did not go out to vote against it. I am pro-life. I am not against the gay or pride or any LGBT, but you cannot contradict yourself.
Right.
Everybody in this country has a vote. So our approach has to be different. It's about our approach. We have to emphasize the entirety of the ecosystem. It's not just about voting for this or voting for that. It has to be about us coming out to say, you know what, I support this policy, I disagree with this policy. This is where we need to do this. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. And if, unfortunately, we pass on this indifference to our children, then we're completely doomed, the African race. We're not. I mean, Nigeria is supposed to be taking the frontline leadership in this because we have the biggest number, but we are not. So how can we say we are king of Africa? Kingship has a lot to do with leadership, and leadership has a lot to do with sacrifices. We have to lead. Okay, right now you're hosting this webinar, and I'm sure you reached out to a lot of people. How many people are on the line right now?
Wait, this was the
How many
important.
people are
It's always like that. Thank you so much, though. Just hang on for a while. I'm going to reach out to some of the other guests, but I wanted to just sort of piggyback on something you just said that's so important. The faith-based community in the African faith-based community, we really have to rethink how we do things, right? Because you pay taxes. You don't argue when it comes to paying taxes, right? So when we come to you, where a majority of our people, just as you know, Mr. Yang had enumerated earlier, people associate with what they know, you know. So a lot of people in our community, you will find them in the church or the mosque for the most part. So since that's where they are, why aren't these faith-based community very active when it comes to political, you know, a movement in terms of mobilization? We're not asking that you vote for one candidate or the other. Sometimes we do ask that, but most importantly, we're asking that you empower your people, since they believe in you, the imams and the pastors. They believe in what you say. We're saying that we need the churches in our community, and the mosques, the masjids in our community, to mobilize and register their people to get out and vote, whoever they want to voting for. Anyway, on that note, we can come back to that. That's another conversation. And I think we should host another session of these, you know, in the next, before the election. I'm going to call on Brother Abdurrahman Diallo. I mean, this young man is a very brave young man that really ran for, you know, office in the Bronx. I'm thinking the last few years or so. Even though he did not win, he came close to winning. And if the African community have spoken together and joined hands and mobilized and not divide, I think he would have won. But we appreciate you coming, you know, Mr. Diallo. So the floor is yours. Please go ahead and speak to the challenges that you faced while you were running and what you think is happening now, why this critical moment, we need to come together and really make sure our people go out and vote. Go ahead, Mr. Diallo. Okay, I see you in the way.
Hello.
Okay.
Hey, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. First, I'm deeply honored to be here, and thanks a lot. And I want to acknowledge, and thank, people who spoke before me, especially Mr. Mamadou Nyan, Dr. Bola, and Madam Lara, and yourself. And, the dedication and the hard work over the past 30 years, you guys have been very instrumental in advancing the African community. So your contribution, in general, have laid solid foundation for which I think the new generation can build upon. So this is, I think we have something here to build upon. So it's very important to acknowledge that. And so yeah, I wanted to thank you guys, for the past 30 years work you have been doing. So as we look for the future, I think it's important to recognize that politics, it's local. So decision made at the local level directly impact our lives, from the quality of our school, the healthcare, the safety of our neighborhood, the housing policy. So local elected official and policy, set the foundation for the broader national policy. So, we are speaking about this national election, but it's important also to make people realize that the local election impacts the national policy. So it's very important for us as African community to be deeply, very engaged at the local level. I think that should be our first thing. Moreover, I think we need to inspire the next generation, showcasing African immigrants who have successfully made difference through our political or civic engagement. That also can serve as powerful role model. I mentioned you guys here, you are powerful role model that we need to showcase you guys in a different platform. This will, not only give people voice, but encourage other young leaders to take leadership role, to be involved in the civic, political, or news, or communication in anything, just to advance our community. So yeah, I think most of you mentioned here for a few things I wanted to comment, especially, in terms of politics is sacrifice. This is, I think it's palpable in our community that if we are looking for do fundraising to buy a masjid, I think we can get $1 million in the next 2 weeks, or a church or something. But when you come to political, it's we're not there yet. We don't have that culture yet. I think we still have the back home culture where politicians give money to voter instead of the other way around. I think we will have to work hard to break that cycle. And the second thing is, I think, speaking about African, I think Mr. Young mentioned this thing. We are 54 countries, different multiple languages, multiple cultures, and stuff. We're using African community loosely here because, even within one country, there's a multiple culture, multiple people, multiple ethnicity. So even in one country, it's hard to bring those people together. Imagine you have 54 countries, right? So I think we have been using that loosely, African community, but I think maybe we have to kind of like sit down and really rethink of that. What does that mean, right? What does that mean to be African? And I think that's something we have to, push forward. Like maybe the Latino, they all at least have one thing in common. They speak Spanish, right? Or something like that. But what do we have in common as African? Of course, we have something in common. We're all from the continent. But beside that, what do we have in common to bring people together? You will have the Nigerian community, you will have the Ghanaian, the Gambian, the Guinean, right? You might see one elected official that will go to one particular African community. Then they get an endorsement and they will say, I got endorsement from the African community, right? So how do we reconcile all of these things? I think it's important. Just to close this thing, New York City here, I think was an article, I think around 2013, was about 250,000 African immigrants in New York City, right? That's about what, 4% at the point, 4% at that point, there was 8 million residents in New York City. But New York City called itself progressive city. To this date, we've never had any African immigrant elected in the history of the city, right? As of we speak here right now, we never had an African immigrant born here or came here. We never had an African immigrant elected in the history of New York City. So I think especially for you leader that live in New York City here, it's important for us to tackle that issue because it's very important for us to to give that. There's many other cities in the country that are not even African immigrant dominated, but they have elected Africans in their city. But when it comes to city council here, when it comes to the board of presidents, when it comes to district attorney or mayor or those positions that are elected in the city, we never had an African. I think it's a big coalition and stuff. So that's my contribution, but I'm really kind of like a little grateful to be here, and I want to also keep acknowledging your work for the past 30 years for our community. Some of you I have never met, but I have followed you, meet on social media or see you on different platforms. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much. So eloquent. Thank you. So I'm going to now ask Dr. Motosho. Dr. Motosho, again, is a prominent leader in the African community and also in New York, especially, and also in the United States and also in Nigeria specifically. And he, as I said earlier, when, at the top of the show, Dr. Motosho was how we United African Coalition came about, right? Dr. Motosho and 3 other African immigrants stepped up to run to put a bid in for District 16th in the Bronx. And the African community, that was the first time and the last time anyway in recent times that I remember that we all came together and say, this kind of looks like Banana Republic. You can't have 4 or 5 candidates running for the same seat. You're competing against each other. Then we all came together and said, well, let's really, put our heads together and identify the most qualified candidate. I mean, decided by all of us, let's get a consensus. And Dr. Motosho emerged to be that candidate that we all, supported to run for that district. And the United African Coalition was founded and, I suppose, tested at that time. And, here we are, we're trying to get this organization back, off the ground. Resources, it's a major problem for us. We don't have the funding. And then people volunteer, they fall off the wagon, there's division, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, Dr. Motosho, welcome. I mean, you're the right person to really, talk to us about this particular cycle, the 2020 election, and your experience back then. Why did you step up to run, and what your experience has been? And you're also on the ground in the Bronx. The political engine and the inner workings and the dynamics of the community at large in the Bronx and in New York City. Dr. Motosho, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, let me first of all apologize. I know I came on at about 2 p.m., but I was on the Facebook and I was just listening live when everything just started, and I was wondering why am I unable to participate. Then I went back and looked at my text message so that I said Zoom. Well, I'll make it short and sweet. Once again, there are so many familiar faces on this call. Madam VP, my brother Yang, Ibrahim, almost everybody. Let me just make it a little simple. Politics. Well, full disclosure, I will not regard myself as a career politician. And why I put that up front is because to win an election, right, it goes beyond just campaigning, raising money, and everything else in between. I want to commend all those that have run for office before I stepped in over a decade ago. That was 2013. Of course, 2013, it was the election cycle. That's not when the process starts. The process will have started about 5 years before then. I want to commend everyone that have run for office in various capacities, from Reverend Kayode to Sidi Kwai and several other Africans that have put attempts here in New York City, to be specific. And the reason why I'm going that route is because, number one, and also those who are just running recently, Ibrahim and others, I want to commend your efforts. we have to understand where we are coming from. We are from Africa, where democracy is practically a new entity to us. The oldest democracy in Africa is not anywhere near what we have here, right? And it's only one country that probably have that. Other countries have had interrupted democracy. And that is what most of us got used to. Now, when you look at where we're coming from, it's not any surprise that, I mean, I agree with everything that everybody have said. When it comes to faith-based, when it comes to raising funds, when it comes to participating or registering, right? It's because our foundation, it's exactly just like that. Now, one of the speakers have said earlier on that, hey, we don't have to pass this on. I believe it's Madam VP, Madam Lara Okrumbi said, we don't need to pass this on to the next generation because most of our children, or our children now, they've called the United States their home and they are making waves. And I'm happy with that. But they are now understanding more of politics here than we do. We had to learn it either by, I don't want to use the word by hook or by crook. We have to go to school here to learn it, to understand, oh yes, before you have to have a grassroots, you have to connect to this, you have to join the machine, you have to do this, you have to do that. So many factors that hinders us. But we should give ourselves a good commendation, understanding that we are still, our mindset is still very young in politics. When it comes to organizing, two basic things are important: relationship and trust. And I think Honorable Akemi mentioned it as well. That relationship is a lifetime thing. That trust is a lifetime thing. It's not just overnight. So when I go around and say, oh, hey, Dr. Motoshaw, yeah, your base, African base, and whatever, what do you call your base? Where's your, what do you call your democratic club? You know, or what's the name of your democratic club and whatever. And of course, I want to applaud several individuals that have stepped up to the plate, building this relationship, from Madam Nokunubi to Mr. Kusoya and others. Even Akiem himself, that decided at a point in time want to come up with NEPA. And Madam Buki, championing the cause of UNAC, along with others, Sheikh Musa, Len, and several here in New York City. We have to understand this is a phenomenon that we're still trying to come together. Now, I just want to touch on something very simple. Why is it that when we come together, we fall apart eventually? Or people are just waiting to say, oh, well, okay, that's it. It's because one common element that we put in place is we form a union around an event. When that event is over, then there's no more interest. Everybody just fall apart. I mean, Abdurrahman, we tell you, hey, yes, when he was running for office, he built a couple of coalition and stuff like that, right? Even as we speak, I have an event in my community. I was privileged to be to be part of the community board for 25 years. No sooner that I came into the country, I joined the board, right? And something led to it is because there was a common interest. And the community was not ready to rent a house to me at the time. And I was fortunate and blessed that I was able to repatriate some of my funding with the Ministry of Defense in Nigeria to bring it in and bought a property. Now we have a challenge. Nobody wanted to be the president of the Homeowners Association. I took up that challenge because I had some little experience with the Nigerian Navy. I wasn't scared of all these various organizations of, should I call it, I don't want to call them thugs, right? I mean, different groups that are running various areas and neighborhoods. I wasn't afraid of them. I was ready to confront them. And they say, oh yeah, this guy is bold. But that was not even the issue. How many Africans are in that small caucus? Very, very few. Because we tend to mind our business, we tend to go about our business unless there is a problem. Here in the Bronx, a couple of things that brought us all together as Africans. Either because we had a fire disaster, other because we had one African being killed by the police, and several other things. But those events, when they fizzle away, we cannot, and I'm saying this with all due respect, we cannot build on an event to make a political activity. No. And that is why I'm advocating. I'm also full disclosure member of NEPAC. NEPAC wasn't built on an event, and that's why they're still thriving. So I'm going to stop here. That please, we don't have to beat up ourselves. We're doing well, and there's still a lot to be done, and we need to encourage the younger folks, the younger generation, for taking it to the next level. And those of us who think that, oh, now I'm getting tired because of all these, should I call it shenanigans within ourselves, that's also politics. We will agree to disagree. I mean, let me use a practical example. Yeah, Israel is at war, right? But they had a coalition. And just last Sunday, one of the partners in the opposition said, hey, listen, I'm stepping aside, right? On principle.
Right.
That's politics. But that doesn't change the common interest.
Right.
And that common interest is what we need to use the blueprint that I think, in my opinion, NAPAC got it right. There is a common interest of what they need to do and what they want to achieve. And that is called collective impact. And I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Buki.
Thank you. I know you underscore NEPAC.
And everyone, good afternoon. I may have to jump off, please.
I know you, before you leave though, I know you underscore NEPAC all the time, but I still made reference to the United African Coalition, which is actually under which this event is organized. And I still consider you part of that. And I was just like, okay, why didn't you mention United African Coalition at all? Calling you out.
I mentioned African Coalition.
Right.
African Coalition, African Coalition was formed in 2013 because of an event,
Right.
which was 4 Africans running for office in the Bronx.
You were one of them.
And that's why I'm making a comparison that we should not, with all due respect, stay away from an event, right? When I say an event, African Coalition has been around for a while, but I said NEPAC got it right because it's not just because of one single event, but collective impact. So now we have a collective leadership here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Right. I'm giving kudos to you for holding African Coalition UNAC together and other members, which I'm also one of them, right? Yeah. But I don't want us to feel, oh, in the last 10 years, what have we done successfully? You have done a lot, and under your leadership in recent times, we are also moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ibrahim Ahmed, are you still on the line? Brother Ahmed is also, a prominent member of the African community, and he actually represents a unique block because he's Hausa Yoruba, which is, one of the combinations, very powerful combination. Not because Hausa Yoruba, I'm just saying he's multi, whatever that word is. Ibrahim, are you still on this call? Because I would like you to say a few words if you're still here. Okay, I don't see you on the line. So we have just a few minutes left. What I would like to leave us with is we need to host another session of these, and then, Ahmed is here. So let me just be quiet for a minute and let you speak a few minutes so I can close out, and we will come back next time and continue this conversation. It's really very important. Go ahead, Brother Ibrahim. You're welcome. Yeah. So
first of all, I am able to meet some part of the conversation, and as a result of some, unavoidable circumstances, so I didn't get to
Thank
coming
you.
on time.
No problem.
And thank you very much for organizing this very great occasion. And then I'm also grateful and thankful to those who have spoken. I think I felt like I'm the best student of the day who happened to have the opportunity to listen to all the speakers and even consume a lot of information that, hey, this is a very good for me. So I don't even have to say anything. But by the way, I jotted some points that I always had in mind as a person who have been part of the community and doing things one way or another in the macro or micro. So what is my issue of concern that I jotted? I think the first one was from the brother Mr. Nang that spoke about we Africans and how we be our size in America, and as Africans under 54 countries, and the challenges we are facing here in America, and the kind of politics that we traded, thinking that maybe that is what is going to work for us. Of course, as far as I'm concerned, on that note of his statement, there's always something I had in mind that bothers me. You see, we as Africans, we have challenges that we're facing within our local base where we base in America. And not only that, in most of the areas in America, you will see us being predominant from particular tribes or country. So that play a very big role and impact. So that come also along with the kind of culture we believe that politics should be played. In connection to what the sister said, Sister Miss Okunubi, about the church and the politics, I think with our experience belonging to a community that religiously inclined, and not only that, but also based within a territory where politics is very, very active. So we try to be very, very careful and observant in terms of being bipartisan. Like, for example, from the history, I know some of us, like Dr. Omotosho and Ms. Shonuga, will testify to even Diallo, his community, we religious-based community. So when we move people that we are contesting, it's just because of our own selfish interest, because it is we. But by the same token, we, as the community where I participate fully, that I'm part of the executive, we sat down and make some observation. And that observation is how to be bipartisan in terms of bringing an open policy for any candidate who presents himself or who have enough meritable.
Yeah. I'm sorry to, interrupt you. This is really, I'm sorry about this. So we have like 1 minute to wrap up. I don't believe we can extend this Zoom call. I don't see anything alerting me to do that. So we might just have to revisit this conversation, please. I'm really sorry to do that to you. So we will come back. I really want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy Saturday afternoon. And thank you for contributing so much to this discussion. We'll come back and do that. I want to thank my back crew, Anthony, Honorable Anthony Afolo. Thank you always for supporting the background. And also Tracy, thank you, Tracy. And Femi also was part of the tech people behind trying to make this work for me, because I'm somewhat technologically challenged. But I thank you. I thank everyone. I promise you, Brother Ibrahim, when we come back next time, the part 2 of the discussion, I will give you the platform to elaborate further what you're saying. We really appreciate it. Very important about what, how a community can move forward. And also, we want to come back and talk about what can we do, action, to really mobilize, as they have talked about past speakers, in light of the battleground states. What can we do with other Africans that are in those states that have done this organization very well, mobilizing? How can we partner with them to make sure that we drive our people out to vote in this most critical election 2024? I thank everyone joining us. I really, we appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much.
The next time. Thank you so much, all. Yeah.